Good afternoon. We have a full plate of bills and witnesses this afternoon, so I'm going to limit my opening remarks to comment on the VA's testimony on my own bill, which is H.R. 2481. Yesterday I introduced H.R. 2481 in response to suggestions from the Atlanta Varro team, who noted that certain types of mistakes on applications for post-9/11 GI Bill benefits cause significant delays in processing original claims. Apparently, some veterans are inadvertently revoking programs for which they have no entitlement, or they're choosing older programs and giving up post-9/11 when they choose certain older programs to give up to get the post-9/11 benefit. My bill would have the VA review an application, and if it's obvious that the veteran made what appears to be an inadvertent error, then the VA would be able to choose the best program, inform the veteran, and offer the veteran the opportunity to reject the VA's recommendation. This process would not stop their application from moving forward and could substantially reduce processing times for original claims. The VA has already provided us with technical assistance on this bill, and I'm grateful that they have offered additional help. Given that assistance and staff conversations, I'm hopeful that the VA will comment on this bill today, and we will have further discussion during their testimony or possibly after their testimony. We have several statements for the record today, and without objection, we'll include those in the record. I now recognize the distinguished ranking member, Ms. Kirkpatrick, for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. I would like to thank everyone for joining us, and I would like to thank our witnesses for taking time to testify and answer our questions. We have a number of bills before us today which extend or refine important veterans programs, including those for homeless veterans reintegration and veterans educational assistance, among other issues. My colleagues have written and introduced strong legislation focused on improving the lives of our veterans. I look forward to seeing how these efforts today will impact our veterans across the nation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for scheduling this hearing to review these bills. I look forward to the testimony and discussion we will have today, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Kirkpatrick. I'd like to begin by recognizing Chairman Miller for his testimony. Chairman Miller, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Kirkpatrick, we all appreciate the opportunity to appear before you at the subcommittee today. To my colleagues here on the committee and at the witness table as well, it's good to see everybody. I want to talk to you a little bit this afternoon about my bill 2327, the Veterans Economic Opportunity Administration Act of 2013. I think everybody in this room is well aware of the number of claims that the Veteran Benefits Administration is facing right now, and according to the June 24th Monday morning report, we get a report every Monday morning, there were 801,931 compensation and pension claims in the inventory. Now, this is not a new problem. Using the data from the VA website, the total CMP inventory was 221,729 as of June of 2000. And I want to show you how it has increased since then. 327,275 in June of 04. In June of 08, it was 404,161 and 913,690 in June of 2012. Now, we all know that we've had wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as the Nemers decision that the court required to reopen tens of thousands of Vietnam-era claims, and they've all increased the workload at the department. And to meet that increased workload, VBA has devoted the lion's share, 14,415 of its 20,815 employees to work on these CMP or compensation and pension claims. So if you review the testimony of the VSOs, you will also see that they too focus mostly on the compensation program. Now, I'm not saying that the focus is wrong, just that that's the fact. One of this committee's ways of ensuring that the disability claims backlog and related issues did not consume an inordinate amount of focus to the neglect of other important programs was to undergo a reorganization. Specifically, the Committee of Economic Opportunity was created to specialize oversight attention on VA programs. that enhance economic opportunity. And the result of that reorganization is very clear. Sustained oversight on economic opportunity programs and issues, organization and passage of major legislation such as the Vow to Hire Heroes Act and provisions to assist VA in meeting and exceeding acquisition goals for small business owned by service-disabled veterans. Now, I believe that VA, too, would benefit from this type of specialization, and that is what H.R. 2327 would bring about. It would create a new fourth administration to handle VA programs that we typically regard as providing economic opportunity. Similar to this subcommittee's focus, those issues are education, vocational rehab, loan guarantee, and small business. And this shift would in fact reorganize the value of veterans' economic security programs that promote employment. So under H.R. 2327, the Veterans Economic Administration would be co-equal to the VBA, the VHA, and the NCA, and would be headed by an undersecretary nominated by the President and confirmed by the Senate. The bill would require nominees to have senior level experience in the managing similar programs in the private sector. The bill would also require that VA would staff the new administration from existing resources, and my bill would have two immediate and I believe very positive effects. First, it would allow the Undersecretary for Veterans Benefits to concentrate efforts on reducing the compensation backlog, a challenge sufficient for its own specialized focus and dedicated resources. Second, it would allow the new Undersecretary for Economic Opportunity to improve the visibility and resourcing of economic opportunity programs. That will obviously bring what some call creative tension to the budget process and hopefully result in more effective use of resources. One specific advantage over the current structure is that this bill would place specific experimental requirements on one person's appointed requirements as the Undersecretary for Economic Opportunity. And anyone appointed would have to have significant private sector experience in one or more of these types of programs administered by the Veterans Economic Opportunity Administration. Mr. Chairman, this bill represents a positive step to assist the VA in addressing its claims issues and to give renewed importance to programs that enable veterans and their families to improve their lives. It's long past due for economic opportunity issues to be at the forefront and in the center as it relates to VA, and I thank you for the opportunity to testify this afternoon.
Thank you, Chairman Miller. We will now start with the first panel. With us today are our colleagues Ken Calvert, Elijah Cummings, John Delaney, Alan Grayson, and Bill Johnson. Gentlemen, you will each be recognized for 5 minutes. Let's begin with Mr. Calvert.
Thank you, Chairman Flores, Ranking Member Kirkpatrick, and the distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting me here to testify today on H.R. 331, a bill that would streamline the VA process to the benefit of our veterans. The issue is fairly specific to community college districts that have multiple colleges as part of their district. Currently, the Department of Veterans Affairs requires community colleges to certify that their veteran students are enrolled for a specific number of classes before the VA will disperse student benefits. Ranking Member Takano's congressional district and my district include a community district with 3 colleges. The community college district operates under uniform curriculum for all 3 colleges. Under current regulations, each of the 3 colleges must write letters to other colleges within the district to verify their classes meet the regulations. This unnecessary paperwork delays the benefits of the veterans and increases the processing time and costs of the college district as well as the VA. The process is unnecessary because 1, all the college's curriculum is approved at the district level and is aligned across all the colleges. The district registration system includes an option for a student to register at any one of the colleges at the same term. 3, the district computer system contains all student and course information on one record that can be assessed and viewed at any of the colleges. And 4, a student's official transcript includes courses taken at all of the 3 colleges. H.R. 331 would correct that problem by permitting each college in the district to certify veterans for all classes attended within the district rather than just for classes attended at that particular college. H.R. 331 would update the rules, which mean veterans would receive their benefits sooner and the VA would have less paperwork to process. H.R. 331 provides an important and necessary legislative fix to a problem that is impacting veterans in my district and Congressman Takano's congressional district, and could be impacting thousands of veterans across the country. I'd like to personally thank Chairman Flores' staff for their work and advice in drafting this bill, and I welcome any questions the subcommittee may have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Calvert. Mr. Cummings, recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman, Ranking Member Takano, and members of the subcommittee for inviting me to testify today. For the last 2 years, I've aggressively investigated illegal foreclosures, inflated fees, and other abuses by banks against service members, veterans, and their families. In my opinion, no one is more deserving of our nation's help than our military service members fighting for our freedoms. Yet under current law, certain service members, veterans with disabilities and surviving spouses, are not receiving the critical protections they need and deserve. As a result, banks are foreclosing on homes at the very moment when our heroes and their families deserve our support. As a country, we can do better. We must do better. That is why I introduced H.R. 1842, the Military Family Home Protection Act. This is a common sense bill that will better protect military families and veterans with disabilities by closing the loopholes and providing needed reforms to the Service Members Civil Relief Act. This legislation is supported by the American Legion, Veterans of Foreign Wars, Paralyzed Veterans of America, Disabled American Veterans, Military Officers Association of America, Gold Star Wives of America, and Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, all of whom have written letters of support. I request unanimous consent to submit these letters into the record. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This legislation has had overwhelming bipartisan support over the past 2 years. More than a year ago, I came before this committee and testified about similar legislation, H.R. 5747. This committee came together in a bipartisan way and to support and pass that bill. And when the legislation was included as an amendment to the defense bill last year, it passed by an overwhelming bipartisan vote of 394 to 27. Unfortunately, the bill never became law because of objections by one senator who was seeking additional information. This month, the House came together again in solidarity and passed on legislation by voice vote as an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act, and I thank every member of this committee for your support. It could not have happened without you. I believe that if we keep up our efforts and if we educate people about what this bill does, we will finally be able to deliver this legislation to the President's desk. H.R. 1842 will ensure that service members who are placing their lives at risk overseas will not also have to fight here at home to keep a roof over their heads and those of their families. This bill will extend foreclosure protections to the surviving spouses of service members who are killed in the line of duty. The legislation will extend foreclosure protections to veterans who become disabled due to service-connected injuries under Chapter 61 of the U.S. Code, and service members who are placed in convalescent status due to illness or injury. Finally, this bill will increase the civil penalties for mortgage-related violations under the SCRA to better reflect the seriousness of such violations and the tremendous impact these violations have on the lives of service members, veterans with disabilities, and surviving spouses. We owe it to our men and women in uniform, Mr. Chairman, to take action now. And this legislation provides common sense, bipartisan, and widely supported protections to those who deserve them the most. I ask this committee to support this effort to provide our men and women in uniform with the protections they desperately need and, of course, they deserve. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Cummings. Mr. Delaney.
Thank you, Chairman Flores and Ranking Member Kirkpatrick and my other colleagues for the opportunity to address this subcommittee on H.R. 2011. The Veterans Advisory Affairs Committee has long been a bipartisan initiative in this House. And the reason for that is simple. Members of Congress and this grateful nation truly want our veterans to receive the benefits they've earned. There's also a strong belief in our country that we need to do more to address unemployment and to ease our veterans' transition to civilian life. For example, current unemployment rate for Iraq veterans is over 10%. that is too high. That's the motivation behind H.R. 2011, the Veterans Advisory Committee on Education Improvement Act. Specifically, to ensure that current educational programs are working properly, our veterans need a voice in the VA. This bipartisan legislation does two very important things. First, it extends the Veteran Advisory Committee on Education through 2015. Absent congressional action, the Veterans Advisory Committee on Education will sunset at the end of this year, which would be unfortunate. This committee, which is currently comprised of veterans, policy experts, and advocates, advises the VA on how to improve educational and job training programs. Second, and importantly, this legislation expands the committee to include post-9/11 veterans. The reasons for this are obvious. We need to make sure their voice is heard at the VA. This is a committee that works. Since 2003, the VA has implemented 57 recommendations from the committee on how to improve job training and educational programs. These recommendations include improvements to the post-9/11 GI Bill, which provided educational benefits to over 600,000 veterans in 2012 alone. The committee has also updated the VA's Principles of Excellence program, which requires that educational institutions end fraudulent and aggressive recruiting programs and provide veterans with a timeline for graduation. We all understand that our veterans' unemployment rate is too high, and when we talk about improving existing programs, I believe it's essential that the VA is responsive to those directly affected. I know that every member of the Veterans Affairs Committee takes their responsibilities to our veterans very seriously. All of us in the House do as well. I thank my colleague, Mr. Renacci, and my other co-sponsors for their support of this bill. Helping our veterans transition to civilian life is one of the most critical challenges facing our country. This legislation gives our post-9/11 veterans a voice, helps ensure that our current programs are working, and helps identify ways that we can improve. The bill is about smart government. It's about more efficient and more effective government. I thank the committee for their time this afternoon and look forward to collaborating with you on this important legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Delaney. Mr. Grayson.
Thank you, Chairman Flores and Ranking Member Kirkpatrick. I appreciate the opportunity to join you in this legislative hearing. I'm here today to address H.R. 821, a bill to amend the Service Members Civil Relief Act to provide surviving spouses with certain protections relating to mortgages and mortgage foreclosures and for other purposes. In plain English, this bill would extend mortgage foreclosure protections to the surviving spouses of men and women who are killed while serving in the United States military. Under current law, members of the military are shielded from foreclosure while they are on active duty. This bill would extend the same protection to a surviving spouse of a serviceman who is killed while serving our nation. H.R. 821 is a reintroduction of last term's H.R. 1263, which Bob Filner, my good friend and the former chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee, introduced and passed through the House of Representatives by a voice vote during the last Congress. Unfortunately, the Senate never acted on the bill. The only difference between Congressman Filner's bill and my bill appears in Section 3. This is a slight change resulting in a shorter bill that reflects intervening changes in the law made by the Honoring America's Veterans and Caring for Camp Lejeune Families Act of 2012. Previously, service members were afforded foreclosure protections for 9 months after they were separated from service. They now have a full year, and this bill now reflects that. Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, Florida is a state that produces a high number of men and women who enlist in our armed forces. It's also a state where a large number of veterans now call home. Unfortunately, Florida has lost 343 of its sons and daughters in Iraq and Afghanistan, a number second only to Texas. Given that statistic and given the fact that I represent a district that's consistently ranked at or near the top in foreclosure activity nationwide, I felt compelled to reintroduce this bill. This committee held multiple hearings on the issue throughout the last Congress, and there were consistent reports on the need for it. In January of 2011, a J.P. Morgan Chase official told NBC News that over 4,000 service members had been illegally overcharged on their mortgage interest rates, and that many military families had been improperly foreclosed upon in violation of the Service Members Civil Relief Act. This revelation addressed not only service members who had been SCRA protection subjects, but also cover the actions of only one bank. Surviving spouses are not afforded the same protection by the SCRA, and we can only guess how many unfortunate husbands and wives lost their homes when they needed our protection the most. Later last year, more allegations surfaced of SCRA violations by J.P. Morgan Chase and other lending institutions. In response, this committee held oversight hearings to review these allegations and received testimony from Captain Jonathan Rowles and Ms. Julia Rowles about their troubles with J.P. Morgan Chase. And in response to that testimony and other revelations that came to light through the committee's continuous oversight of SCRA abuses, H.R. 821 requires lending institutions to employ or designate an SCRA compliance officer. Every bank must take the SCRA seriously, and every bank must have at least one person responsible to ensure the institution's compliance. Service members and veterans, as well as their families, should have an opportunity to avoid the black marks on their credit history by working with lenders to minimize the chance of foreclosure. Some military families experience understandable difficulties, often related to owning a home when where a service member is stationed in the transition from the military to the civilian world. And these problems are only magnified in the tragic instance of a service member's death. When a family grieves over the loss of a service member, the resulting change in income is likely to force a surviving spouse to make difficult financial decisions, including whether or not he or she will keep or sell the home. A surviving family should be given sufficient time after the loss of a loved one to refinance, to make arrangements with the lender to restructure the loan, or to sell the house. Unfortunately, right now, they are not afforded the extra time they often need. Mr. Chairman, this is a serious problem, and it's one that can be solved. I thank you for your time today. If I just may add a short personal note, I will call your attention to the fact that Congressman Filner served in this body for 20 years and served as the chairman of this committee. All too often, we're judged only by our electoral successes and not judged enough by our lawmaking. I think it would give every member of this committee, as well as me personally, a great pride to call Congressman Filner and tell him, Bob, your bill is now law. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Grayson. Mr. Johnson, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Flores, Ranking Member Kirkpatrick, and members of the subcommittee. I appreciate the opportunity to testify before you on H.R. 1357, legislation I introduced to amend the definition of full-time for technical training programs under the Veterans Retraining Assistance Program, or VRAP. As an Air Force veteran who served as subcommittee chairman on the House Veterans Affairs Committee last Congress, I was proud to support the Vow to Hire Heroes Act of 2011. This important legislation provided several provisions to assist unemployed veterans, including improvements to the Transition Assistance Program, or TAP, veterans tax credits, requirements for translating military skills and training into commercial opportunities, and expanded educational and training benefits, including VRAP. The VRAP program provides unemployed veterans aged 35 through 60 who are not eligible for other VA education benefit programs up to 12 months of full-time training assistance. Over 53,000 veterans are enrolled in training programs through VRAP, and the Department of Veterans Affairs is still accepting applications from eligible veterans. An unintended shortfall of VRAP came to my attention last fall when unemployed veterans in eastern and southeastern Ohio who were approved for VRAP were unable to find eligible technical training programs for their chosen occupation. The reason being that programs approved for VRAP must be full-time, which is defined as requiring 18 to 22 seat time hours. As these veterans discovered, the majority of technical training programs that are considered to be full-time outside of the VA's definition fall short of VRAP's seat time requirement. For example, several veterans from Ohio's 6th District wish to use their approved VRAP benefits to complete a welding program, an occupation on the rise in eastern and southeastern Ohio due to increased oil and gas development in the region. While there were welding programs available in the area, they did not meet the seat time hour requirement. Some of these programs, such as the welding program at the Washington County Career Center, are even approved by the VA under regular GI benefits, GI Bill benefits, but as part-time programs. As programs under VRAP must be full-time, these veterans were approved for VRAP benefits but unable to use them. H.R. 1357 is intended to fix this unintended obstacle and expand opportunities for unemployed veterans to complete technical training programs. Specifically, this legislation would amend the VRAP definition of full-time for technical training programs to only require 16 seat time hours, so long as these programs are also approved by the VA for other educational benefits. The purpose of VRAP is to give America's veterans access and the opportunity to enhance their skills, enabling them to better compete in today's job market. In my view, the difference of a few seat time hours should not prevent a veteran from taking a training program that will enhance their ability to be hired, particularly if the veteran ends up with a comparable certificate or degree from other institutions that require slightly more seat time hours. Chairman Flores, Ranking Member Kirkpatrick, thank you again for the opportunity to speak on this important legislation, H.R. 1357. I am hopeful that this legislation will be favorably considered by the Veterans Affairs Committee so as to provide our nation's unemployed heroes with more opportunities to enhance their skills and find gainful employment. And with that, I yield, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Cook, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My bill, H.R. 2150, reauthorizes the Homeless Veterans Reintegration Program, or the HVRP, which I probably won't use that acronym anymore because it's too long. But this bill will continue essential services that assist homeless veterans in finding jobs, whether they've been separated for 1 day or 20 years. It provides grants to organizations that assist homeless veterans directly in job training, helping them to return to the workforce and remain independent. These organizations have the benefit of experience successfully placing scores of veterans in paying jobs and developing relationship with employers. In addition to this experience, such as job counseling and assistance in writing resumes, they provide clothing and transportation. They also provide medical and substance abuse treatment. If we fail to act, this program will end this year, leaving veterans without this job assistance from their country and the government they serve so well. We must vote to extend this program to fulfill our promise to our heroes so that they do not, or that they didn't return from war simply to be cast aside. I was very active in similar programs in California. Those who know me know I'm very, very passionate about this. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I've seen members of my platoon where they came back, and quite frankly, our state and our country just forgot about them 100%. It's a different culture going from the military back to civilian life. You go from an organization that really cares about you to one where it's entirely different. And we, as a country, as a state, as in different localities, have had a bad record. And this bill is one of those things that can help. We got a long ways to go, and I hope you will support me. And I want to thank the chairman, Chairman Flores, Ranking Member Takano, and Colonel Winstrup for co-sponsoring this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back my time.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. I thank the panel. Are there any questions for the members of the first panel? If there are not, gentlemen, I thank you for your time today, and I'd like to ask the second panel to come forward. With us today on our second panel are Mr. Curtis Coy, accompanied by Mr. John Brizzi from the VA, and Mr. Frank DiGiovanni from the Department of Defense. Gentlemen, my sincerest welcome to each of you. You will each have 5 minutes to summarize your testimony, and your complete written statements will be made a part of this hearing record. Let's start with you, Mr. Coy. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Kirkpatrick, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today to provide VA's views on pending legislation. Accompanying me this morning is Mr. John Brizzi, Deputy Assistant General Counsel. We are certainly encouraged to see those bills aimed at improving economic opportunities for our nation's veterans. We are particularly grateful to see legislation that will improve the Veterans Retraining Assistance Program, extend the Veterans Advisory Committee on Education, allow school consortiums to certify enrollment, and extend the Frye Scholarship to those families who have borne the ultimate sacrifice. We will provide views on the draft bill to improve election requirements for the post-9/11 GI Bill program for the record, but are encouraged to see efforts to help veterans make appropriate decisions. VA defers to the Department of Labor and the Department of Defense on legislation affecting programs or laws administered by those agencies. VA is happy to support legislation that would allow institutions in a district or consortium to certify a student's enrollment regardless of where the student is matriculated. We are pleased to support the Frye Scholarship expansion for children of service members who die after discharge, but would suggest expanding it to 18 months after separation rather than just 60 days. VA data shows that most deaths resulting from serious service-connected injury occur within those 18 months. While we are pleased to support legislation that would expand VRAP to programs pursued at less than full-time basis and prior bills that would extend the VRAP program, we are unclear as to the meaning of 16 seat time hours as required by H.R. 1357 and are ready to work with the committee to address those technical issues. VA does not oppose Section 4B of the Troop Talent Act of 2013 that would allow payment for qualifying courses, but we would note that VA can already approve courses required for license or certification that do not constitute a complete program of training. As well, VA does not support Section 6 of the bill, as we are unclear on the need to reestablish the Professional Certification Licensure Advisory Committee, as tasks such as outreach and auditing for licensing and certification programs are ongoing by VA. Finally, it would be extremely challenging to nominate members, plan, organize, hold meetings, and provide a report assessing the feasibility and advisability of permitting service members to use educational assistance for pursuing civilian employment without being charged entitlement, all within 180 days. VA appreciates the committee's focus on improving veterans' economic opportunities, but we are unable to support the Veterans Economic Opportunity Administration Act of 2013. We believe an appropriate management structure is already in place to oversee veterans programs related to economic opportunities. Finally, VA is encouraged to see two bills that would amend Service Member Civil Relief Act and provide protections against mortgage foreclosures. While VA defers to DOD and Justice on the merits of these bills, we do have some technical concerns with these bills, and again would be very happy to work with the committee on them. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my statement. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. We would be pleased to respond to any questions you or the members of the committee may have about any of these bills or the other legislation discussed in our written testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Coy. Mr. DiGiovanni.
Chairman Flores, Ranking Member Kirkpatrick, distinguished members of the subcommittee. Good afternoon. My name is Frank DiGiovanni, and I serve as the DoD's Director of Training Readiness and Strategy. I'm responsible for military training and education policy from accession, basic training through command exercises and engagement. I'm also a 26-year veteran of the United States Air Force. I'm here to talk to you about specifically H.R. 1796, the Troop Talent Act of 2013. There is written statements provided by the Department on H.R. 1842 and H.R. 821. During the transition process and while they serve in the military, our military members achieve great expertise in hard skills from their military training experience, and education. They also receive soft skills in the area of leadership, teamwork, and decision-making. These skills are not only valued by the military, but we've heard from employees that these are sought-after skill sets in the private sector as well. So HR 1796 helps facilitate this process. The DoD supports many provisions in the Act, including Section 3, which directs the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness to make information available to military members on credentialing opportunities. It also asks us to improve access to accredited civilian credentialing agencies on information as far as the program of instruction for our military members. We would suggest in Section 3 that this access be expanded beyond the cited accredited civilian credentialing agencies to include agencies such as the veterans that can approve Veterans Administration GI Bill payments and also state licensing boards. One of our examples that we've had very good success in working with the states has been with the Lansing Community College, which is a college focused on military members who have been medics and corpsmen. They have an excellent template. We think that what they do to give military members credit for military training, education, experience is something that we should try to emulate throughout the other states in the country. Section 4 covers the use of TWIS transition assistance for courses in pursuit of civilian certifications and licensings, which we support, and also expansion of the NDAA Section 558 from FY12 pilot program to include information technologies. We defer comments on Section 6 to my distinguished colleague from the Veterans Administration. On 1842, the Department supports 1842, which adds several new sections and coverages to service members, surviving spouses, and certain classes of veterans. We feel that H.R. 821 provides good coverages for surviving spouses, but we believe many of the provisions in that act are covered in 1842. In closing, we have had an excellent partnership with several veteran service organizations who will be speaking to you next, so I wanted to tip the hat to those folks. It's an outstanding partnership and certainly helps us in getting the word out as well as understanding what veterans' needs are in the field. In closing, the Department would like to thank the committee for taking up legislation on these critical issues. Our service members bring outstanding leadership, technical expertise, and experience to the workplace. These capabilities are the direct result of the rigorous training, education, and life skills they've gained from serving this country in the military. And I see the rest of my time, sir.
Okay. I thank the panel for their testimony, and I'd like to start with the questions. Mr. Coy, I have three questions on H.R. 2481, which is my bill to facilitate a smoother processing of post-9/11 GI claims. The first one is this: can you tell me why the VA deferred testimony on this? I'm a little puzzled about it because the bill is the outgrowth of a suggestion that came from the staff at Avaro and to try to address a problem that was causing unnecessary delays in the processing post-9/11 GI claims. And the VA was also nice enough to provide us with some technical assistance so we could get the structure of the bill correct. Is it a technical issue, or does the department disagree with the goal of clarifying the process for the post-9/11 GI Bill?
Mr. Chairman, we don't have cleared views on this bill yet, so we haven't. It hasn't gone through the formal process. We certainly look at this bill from a number of aspects as the kinds of things that we hope that it will accomplish. Most certainly, ensuring that our veterans and those original claims are processed in a timely manner is critically important to us. We have some issues with some aspects of the bill, and we'd be happy to work with the committee as we've done already and had a couple conversations as well to ensure that whatever the bill ends up being, it is to accomplish what you hope it is supposed to do.
Okay. Would you agree that that the long-term solution to help the veteran or to eliminate the potential the veteran could make mistakes on the application would be to fully automate the decision tree, if you will, that's in the Vaughn application.
Mr. Chairman, I think any automation of original claims is a good thing. Part of the issue here is I would suggest that some of this is very much a situational environment that may or may not be solved by just a automated solution. There's a couple of examples that I'd be happy to provide, but those are the kinds of things that trying to build into an automated solution may not cover some of those situational pieces that we may have.
Okay. The third question on this is, do you have any other ideas or solution to address this delay causing problem for original applications?
Well, sir, some of the issue of original applications, and I don't know if it's a delay or just a length of time to do it. As we all know, the post 9/11 GI Bill, for example, has well over 5,000 business rules in the long-term solution already. So when we get an original claim, finding out what the veteran is eligible for is a process in itself. And then if the intent of this bill is to ensure that the veteran makes the, quote, right decision. And sometimes, probably in the majority of cases, that right decision is right there staring you in the face. But in some situational environments, it's not. So I would suggest that yes, automation is going to solve a good chunk of that, but I would also respectfully suggest that we automated our supplemental claim process, which is basically the original's been done and a veteran is now just the supplemental claim process is to pay them their housing and so on and so forth. We've been incredibly successful with that automation, and even that automation is yielding about 50% of all supplemental claims going through there untouched by human hands. We had originally thought it would be 25, 30, 35% of supplemental claims, so the success of 50% we're very encouraged with, but even then it's 50%. So original claims is certainly a significant challenge, but we got the most bang for our bucks by automating the supplemental claims first.
Let me try to get in a quick question on H.R. 1842. And we appreciate your careful review of it. Would it be possible for your staff to work with committee staff to work out the technical issues so that we get this bill perfected before the markup later this month?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. We'd be absolutely delighted to do that.
Okay. Thank you. I now recognize the ranking member for her questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first question is for Mr. DiGiovanni. As you mentioned, there are military occupational specialties that have a civilian counterpart, and I'm just wondering what the chances are that when a service member completes their military training in that specialty, they could concurrently also have the civilian certification. Does that make sense to you? Is that possible? What would we have to do to make that happen?
So one of the reasons why I have this tasking within the Department of Defense is because my portfolio encompasses that kind of basic training to all the way until they get out. And so we are actually looking at exactly what you said, 3 lines of action. The first one would be, once you complete initial military training, if you have the requisite experience or training at that time, then we are encouraging people to either go for gap training or directly to a certification or license. The second line of action is once you have the requisite experience. So there are several certifications or licenses that require 4 or 5 years of experience. So there's another opportunity mid-career as an individual completes the requisite experience. And then the last piece, which is in the transition assistance program, where you're about a year out, again, another look to say, you've got this particular skill set, be it either something that translates directly to the private sector, or if you're in the combat arms, there are certifications, for example, for leadership abilities, team working, cognitive decision making. So we're trying to make sure that we look at 3 lines of action across a service member's career in the military for opportunities for licensing credentials.
Do you see any necessary policy changes from us to help push that along?
I think there are policies within the existing authorities in the Department of Defense to put that into Department of Defense instructions and directives. So I think that we have the necessary authorities, I believe, to push that at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Coy, my questions for you are about HR 1842. You said there are some ambiguities in foreclosure in the covered period. Could you elaborate a little bit on that for me?
Yes, one of the examples for in this is what the bill does not reconcile is what period of invalidity would be for foreclosure sales that took place during a covered period. And so it may be that a foreclosure during a covered period may be invalid conceivably forever. And that might very well cloud someone's title down the road. And as a result of that, it's one of those things, for example, that we said we'd be happy to work with the committee on those technical issues to ensure that that kind of thing, while we defer to our colleagues in DOD with respect to any SICRA type things, our loan guarantee folks look at this from the standpoint of how it would affect us down the road or how it would affect veterans. And that one technical issue is clouding, any title issues that may be in the future.
My follow-up question to that is, do you have any concerns that as we continue to legislate in this area, that lenders will be less likely to want to cooperate and provide loans for our veterans? Do you see any of that happening now, and do you have any concerns about us continuing to legislate in this area?
No, ma'am, we have no evidence that lenders are not wanting to lend to veterans. I would suggest the exact opposite is occurring. Those people that have VA-secured home loans have the lowest foreclosure rate for the last, I believe, 15 quarters. And so a lender looks at a VA foreclosure rate and says, this group of individuals are very serious about their mortgage. And so I would suggest that that very well might be the opposite.
Excuse me. Thank you. That's good news, and I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Kirkpatrick. Mr. Runyon, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you,
For your
Mr. Chairman.
questions.
And I truly only have one question for Mr. Giovanni. Kind of what the ranking member was walking you down. Can you give us an update on the department's efforts to complete the licensing and certification pilot for truck drivers and healthcare workers that was required by the 2012 NDAA?
Sir, we are in the process of collecting data on that report. We are required by Section 558 to submit a report to the appropriate defense committees 1 year after commencement of the study, which was on September 28th, 2012. So there's a report due on the Hill to give you an update on our progress this September. Right now we have almost 3,000 service members enrolled in pilot programs in 5 standardized occupational categories of health profession, automotive mechanic, aircraft mechanic, logistics, and transportation, of which the last one you mentioned about the commercial driver's license. We also have seen legislation in over 44 states, which now, for example, allow military members with truck driving experience to get the military skills, the road test part of the commercial driver's license waived if they can show proof from their commander that they actually have experience in the vehicle they're seeking a license in. So there's actually been some great progress there, and I look forward to providing that report to you all in September.
So just to clarify, that report's going to be on time, as far as you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It will be on time. There is a huge new emphasis in the department to make sure that we provide the members of Congress reports in a timely manner, if not early.
Thank you very much. With that, I yield back, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Runyon. Mr. Cook? No questions for Mr. Cook. Mr. Winstrup? No questions. If the rest of the panel doesn't mind, I'd like to do a second quick round of questions on this, and so I'll begin with that. Mr. Coyd, you're in the VA's written statement opposing H.R. 2327, you mentioned that you believe there could be coordination issues if this administration was created. I would think that having an undersecretary advocate for economic opportunity would have just the opposite effect and would facilitate solutions to cross-benefit issues and provide a higher level of coordination and resources to this important part of our veterans' benefits. Can you elaborate on that? Or let me rephrase that. Can you explain what you mean by coordination issues?
I would suggest there's perhaps might be best answered by a couple of examples. One example would be is most recently we evaluated the effects that I mentioned earlier about the long-term solution for supplemental claims and our education claims. And as such, we took the effort to solicit from claims education claims examiners in Atlanta and asked them would they like to be disability claims examiners. It did two or three things. It gave them an opportunity for a higher career path, so a number of people would want to take advantage of it from that standpoint. But as well, they were seasoned claims, VA claims folks, and so making the leap to a disability claims examiner after training was not as difficult as bringing somebody in off the street. So within a number of months, we'll be able to leverage those 100 education claims folks into disability claims folks. I would also suggest that the Undersecretary, Hickey, has laid out a number of plans as we go forward. And when the disability claims backlog is resolved, those number of employees that now may be free to be able to go back to working educational claims or be VRE, or the numbers or the FTEs could be VRE counselors. So there's a number of synergies that are across the board. As we looked at, did we think that creating a fourth administration, as we stand back and look at the management layers that would be required as well of standing up an entirely new administration, might be prohibitive, and any of those folks that we would be standing up from a management perspective could very well be used to handle our claims process or VRE or any of the other economic opportunities. I would suggest further that what VBA did back in May of 2011 by creating the Deputy Undersecretary for Economic Opportunity position to focus on those economic opportunity programs has been, I would hope, somewhat successful from a pejorative standpoint. And we have done a lot of focusing on those programs to ensure that those programs in economic opportunity are given the attention and the leadership that we think they so deserve.
Thank you for that response. What I'm looking for is a flatter, leaner, more mission-focused organization with divisions that are focused. And I don't think there's anything that prevents a VA employee from moving from one of those divisions to another, hopefully without too much friction. I think I've got time to get one more question in, and that is, what would the impact be because of the potential enactment of H.R. 331, which was the consolidated certification bill? What would the impact be on education claims processing?
We think, sir, it would be a positive impact because currently, right now, the legislation says the school should or needs to certify. Being able to consolidate some of those claims, we believe, would be beneficial. In fact, we had put in a legislative proposal to do just this, and so we're very happy and encouraged that the committee has taken the stance that we should go forward with this.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Coy. Do any other members have any follow-up questions for this panel? Ms. Kirkpatrick?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Coy, my questions are about 1796. You say that the VA is already doing outreach, and so I have 3 questions about that. What kind of outreach is being done, on what programs, and what metrics do you have in place to measure whether or not that outreach is accomplishing your goals and is sufficient?
Thank you for your question. First, I would agree that outreach is critically important, and we can always do better at it. We are not suggesting in any way, shape, or form that we're doing all that there could be done with outreach. Some of the outreach things I would suggest that we're doing now is we have what we believe to be a very robust GI Bill website, and we're putting lots of information out from that. On there, we have 8 frequently asked questions, for example, that talk very specifically about those kinds of things. As well, we are very active in conferences, whether they be from the state approving agencies, conferences, or all the other conferences. We're there and we're talking to them across the board. Then certainly, perhaps last but not least, is the Transition Assistance Program and building those that information into the Transition Assistance Program is another aspect of the outreach. So we're not suggesting that we're doing all there is to do in outreach, but the bill talks about doing outreach and compliance, and what we suggested is that we are in fact doing that, and not sure that the legislation would mandate that we do more.
And on what programs? Are you doing outreach on all VA programs, or can you just be a little more specific about that?
What we're doing, most of the outreach on that I'm talking about is in education, employment, and some of those things, for example, that are in the world of economic opportunity. But the outreach that I specifically talked about with respect to the GI Bill website is on educational programs.
And do you keep track of how many hits you have on that website so you know how many veterans you're actually reaching?
Yes, ma'am. We do track how many hits we have on the website, but I do not have that information in my notebook here. I'll be happy to get you that information.
Okay, I would appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, thank you for those additional questions. I yield back.
Thanks,
Yes,
Ms.
ma'am.
Kirkpatrick. Any other members have questions? Mr. Runyon, Mr. Cook, Mr. Winstrom. I want to thank before I close, I want to thank Mr. Coy for the new tips emails that you're sending out for EO programs. I think that's the type of outreach we need. We appreciate you having being proactive in doing that. So I'd like to thank the second panel for your testimony, and you're now excused. And we'll ask the third panel to come to the witness table. With us today for the third panel are Mr. Ryan Gallucci with the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States, Mr. Jeffrey Steele from the American Legion, and Major General Andrew Davis from the Reserve Officers Association. We also have written testimony from Mr. Rick Weidman of the Vietnam Veterans of America, which will be entered into the record. I want to welcome each of you to this hearing, and we'll start with Mr. Gallucci. You're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Flores. Chairman Flores, Ranking Member Kirkpatrick, and members of the subcommittee, on behalf of the men and women of the VFW, the nation's largest and oldest organization of combat veterans, I want to thank you for the opportunity to present the VFW's thoughts on today's pending legislation. The VFW generally supports each bill up for discussion today, and I refer you to my prepared remarks for our in-depth thoughts on each piece of legislation. For the balance of my time, I will focus on 3 specific bills: H.R. 1357, which seeks to improve the Veterans Retraining Assistance Program, H.R. 1796, the Troop Talent Act, and H.R. 1842, the Military Family Home Protection Act. First, on H.R. 1357, the VFW has heard from many veterans that the Veterans Retraining Assistance Program, or VRAP, has already helped them secure the skills necessary to succeed in the competitive job market. Unfortunately, the latest statistics from VA still demonstrate that the benefit remains drastically underutilized, even by veterans who are already approved to participate. The VFW believes that this unique benefit, which is designed to serve the largest population of unemployed veterans, has the potential to change the lives of many more if we slightly modify some of its stringent requirements, allowing veterans the flexibility to complete approved programs. The VFW raised concerns before this subcommittee in April that the requirement for all participants in VRAP to attend as full-time students prevented some from receiving necessary remediation to finish their programs. Furthermore, many veterans who qualify for VRAP may also need to balance other life obligations in order to pay their bills and complete the approved academic program. With these two issues in mind, the VFW is proud to support Representative Johnson's efforts to allow certain VRAP participants to utilize their benefits for programs technically designated as less than full-time. Next, on H.R. 1796, the VFW has consistently advocated to improve the transferability of military training and experience for veterans seeking civilian professional licenses and credentials. While the Department of Defense, private industry, and state governments have made significant efforts in the last few years to improve the translation of military skills for these purposes, the VFW believes that we can do more, which is why we're proud to support Representative Duckworth's Troop Talent Act and its companion bill in the Senate. In a recent town hall meeting with veterans advocates, Congresswoman Duckworth discussed how her personal military experience as an officer afforded her countless professional development opportunities while on active duty. Unfortunately, her enlisted counterparts were not afforded similar opportunities to acquire skills that would prove useful in post-military life. Through the Troop Talent Act, more military personnel will have access to civilian credentialing opportunities while on active duty. Service members will also be allowed to use educational assistance benefits to pursue civilian licenses and credentials, and the military's pilot program on civilian credentialing will expand to include information technology. The bill also requires each service secretary to make specific information on military training available to civilian credentialing bodies and reconstitutes VA's Advisory Committee on Professional Licensure and Certification to ensure that licenses and credentials eligible for programmatic participation remain relevant to civilian careers. The VFW believes that unemployment in the veterans community cannot be solved through post-military intervention alone, and that the military must better prepare its trained professionals to succeed after service. This bill helps to facilitate a service member's smooth transition into a quality career after the military, and we encourage the committee to move quickly on it. Finally, on H.R. 1842, over the last few years, the VFW has heard horror stories about banks foreclosing on military homeowners while either their loved ones are overseas or recovering from life-altering injuries. While the Service Members Civil Relief Act, or SCIRA, offers some protections to vulnerable military families, the VFW believes that some financial institutions skirt the law or even hold military status against certain families when extending credit or other financial services. The VFW believes that these practices must stop, and we are proud to support Representative Cummings' continued efforts to make this possible. This bill seeks to end predatory foreclosures on military families by extending SCIRA protection for families whose loved ones are not only deployed, but also permanent and total disabled, who lost their lives in the line of duty regardless of when the mortgage was commissioned. This bill also strengthens criminal penalties against institutions that knowingly violate SCIRA and creates penalties for withholding or denying financial services for those who claim SCIRA protection. Never again should a military family worry that the bank will seize their home while their loved one is serving overseas, or after their loved one has made the ultimate sacrifice. Military homeowners face unique circumstances and deserve these kind of reasonable accommodations. A similar version of this bill almost passed last year, as Representative Cummings outlined in his statement, as an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act. We hope this committee will once again move this legislation quickly, affording critical financial protections to our military families at times of extreme vulnerability. Chairman Flores, Ranking Member Kirkpatrick, this concludes my statement, and I'm happy to answer any questions any members of the committee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Golici. Mr. Steele, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Flores, Ranking Member Kirkpatrick, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, on behalf of Commander Couts and the 2.4 million members of the American Legion, I thank you and your colleagues for the work you do in support of our service members and veterans as well as their families. As you know, veterans of the Iraq and Afghanistan campaigns, as well as those from previous eras, are met with daunting challenges at home. Unemployment for our newest veterans is still outpacing the national average. Older veterans face a changing job landscape where hard work was once rewarded, but now advanced skill sets are valued. New veterans need help to take the skills they learned in the service into the workforce. We're pleased to see that the pending legislation before us today addresses some of these challenges in productive ways. We've addressed each of the pending bills in our written statement. Here I will highlight just two which we strongly support. H.R. 1796, Troop Talent Act of 2013, sponsored by Representative Tammy Duckworth, is a veterans employment measure designed to ease service members' transitions to civilian employment. This bill would bolster efforts to streamline the process of obtaining certifications and occupational licenses and help veterans put to use skills learned in the military. The American Legion has been urging federal and state lawmakers, as well as industry leaders, to streamline the military to civilian licensing and certification process for a decade and a half now. Enactment of legislation consistent with this effort, like the Troop Talent Act, will benefit not only the service member, but those who eventually employ him or her in the civilian workforce. By encouraging the Department of Defense to provide more information about military training and curriculum to organizations involved with private sector credentialing process, this legislation will help them better account for military training in the awarding of such credentials. Civilian credentialing can contribute to service member and veteran personal and professional career development if done right. However, the VA may lack subject matter experts that can provide recommendations to improve VA's licensing and certification database, or improve the quality of the state approving agency approval process, or develop and update material on the licensing and certification for use in the training of state approving agency staff. Therefore, it is extremely important that the Professional Certification and Licensure Advisory Committee, or PCLAC, be reauthorized, another important provision in this bill. It will bring those subject matter experts to assist VA where they may lack expertise. As you know, the last few years have seen a major cultural shift for the military, with top defense officials supporting service member credentialing, as well as expanded support for veteran credentialing on Capitol Hill with the passage of legislation which the Legion has either helped draft or which we have supported. As such, we believe there's a definite need to resume this independent body which can present new solutions to VA senior leadership and congressional members, as well as other stakeholders. It should also be noted that key provisions of the Troop Talent Act have been included in the House version of the fiscal year 14 National Defense Authorization Act. However, reauthorization of the Professional Certification and Licensure Advisory Committee was not among those provisions because it was outside the jurisdiction of the Armed Services Committee. I acknowledge Deputy Undersecretary Coy's concerns about the committee, but believe that those could be addressed working with this committee and Mr. Coy. Next, H.R. 2011 provides for a 2-year extension of the Veterans Advisory Committee on Education. This advisory committee is composed of members who are prominent leaders in the veterans education and training area. The American Legion has long served as a member and can attest from organizational experience to the value of this advisory committee. We believe there's a definite need to maintain this independent body that is able to analyze and develop intelligent, practical solutions to difficult educational issues, and to present those solutions to VA senior leadership and congressional members, as well as other stakeholders. Salient issues this advisory committee can address include the need to help evaluate the implementation of the Improving Transparency of Educational Opportunities for Veterans Act of 2012, which requires schools to provide academic performance data to the VA, as well as President Obama's Executive Order number 13607, establishing guidelines for institutions catering to service members, veterans, or qualified family members. Also ripe for attention is the larger question of qualitative and quantitative metrics for assessing student outcomes. In conclusion, I appreciate the opportunity to present the American Legion's views and look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Major General Davis, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
As Ranking Member Kirkpatrick and members of the subcommittee, the Reserve Officers Association thanks you for the invitation to appear and give testimony. I am also authorized to speak on behalf of the Reserve Enlisted Association. Although contingency operations in Afghanistan are winding down, there are still 54,000 reservists and guardsmen on mobilizations and deployments, and more than 875,000 outstanding citizen warriors have sacrificed much in order to serve during the last 12 years. The associations that typically testify before this committee are the veteran service organizations. So often the unique needs of the reserve component have been overlooked without ROA's testimony. Reservists and guardsmen are unique because they are discharged from active duty but remain on military service. Their numbers are reported to the VA by the Department of Defense, but the reserve component members' service obligation remains, and they can be recalled to additional active duty. Often they are not given discharge or separation papers that are required for certain veterans' benefits. And most do not have access to the same transition education programs as veterans leaving active service. Due to stealth discrimination and employers' concerns about the mobilization of a peacetime operational reserve, unemployment for 18 to 24-year-old reserve and guard members is triple the unemployment rate for non-affiliated veterans. ROA and REA would like to thank the committee for recognizing the role that military families play in supporting the missions of the uniformed services. H.R. 821 by Representative Grayson and H.R. 1842 by Representative Cummings are bills that make improvements to the Service Member Civil Relief Act. Protection of a serving member's home and finance are key protections needed when deployed or back in the States. H.R. 331 by Representative Calvert and H.R. 1357 by Representative Johnson are bills that improve the tracking of students under the various veteran education benefits. Returning veterans are often non-traditional students. A four-year college program isn't necessarily the path for all veterans. Before graduation, the non-traditional student may leave and be readmitted to a school several times, affected by priorities from current employment and family. Attrition numbers can appear higher if an individual is not tracked through his or her full progress. H.R. 2011 by Representative Delaney would include Chapter 31 of Title 38 under the purview of the Veterans Advisory Committee on Education. ROA and REA concur with this. Vocational rehabilitation plays an important part of transitioning service-connected disabled veterans back to civilian life. ROA and REA hope that H.R. 2011 can be amended to include Chapter 1607 education as well. Chapter 1606, the Montgomery GI Bill for Selective Reservists, is included under the Veterans Advisory Committee, but 1607, which improves their education benefits while they are mobilized, is not under the committee's purview, and it should be. The associations support H.R. 2210 by Representative Young of Florida that would expand the Fry Scholarship to children of those who are awarded the Purple Heart but die within 60 days of the date of discharge or release from active duty. These heroes should not be excluded. However, with H.R. 2210, as with earlier bills, ROA and REA are concerned with the definition of active duty. Reserve and Guard members serve under many different types of activation orders. They have been sent into combat areas or on missions of shorter duration on other than active duty orders, and these other types of orders need to be covered. H.R. 1796 by Representative Duckworth directs the military secretaries to expand communications with serving members on civilian credentialing opportunities. This legislation continues the progress being made at getting military work skills translated and recognized in the civilian work area. ROA and REA support Representative Cook's H.R. 2150 to extend the Homeless Veterans Reintegration Program by 5 years. And we support Chairman Miller's H.R. 2327 to support a Veterans Economic Opportunity Administration within the Department of Veterans Affairs. We find that it is enforcement that is the challenge for both Labor and Justice Department for USERRA. Once again, I would like to thank the subcommittee for the opportunity to testify today and would welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, General Davis, and I thank all of the panel for their testimony. I have a couple of questions for you. The first one has to do, we've got two committees, the Advisory Committee for Education, the Advisory Committee on Licensure and Credentialing. Do you think there are any potential gains in efficiency that could be made if you combine these two advisory committees with the end goal, since the end goal of education in many cases is licensure or the receipt of some sort of a credential? What do you guys think about this? Mr. Steele.
It would certainly make sense to have a certain overlap, if they're not combined, to have a certain overlap of committee membership so that there would be cognizance by both committees of the work being done by the committees. Whether they would be combined or not, that would be a question we'd have to reflect on and get back to you on.
Okay. Mr. Glochi, any initial comments?
Thanks, Chairman Flores. Just thinking about how complicated the landscape of higher education has been over the last couple of years, that's one of the reasons that we would prefer to see the Education Committee reauthorized. We've seen a lot of different arguments about whether the post 9/11 GI Bill is going to the kinds of programs that we intended it to go to. We've seen impropriety in different sectors of higher ed, to include nonprofit publics who are now under the microscope for the way that they extend in-state tuition to certain student veterans. We feel that higher education is such a complex landscape that it demands specific attention, and then licensing and credentialing goes far beyond just the purview of the GI Bill approved programs, but also involves how military professionals are credentialed while they're on active duty.
General Davis, any thoughts?
Let me just add to that on the licensing and credentialing, there are some occupational fields that are obvious, and others I think that were just touched on by your questions, like combat arms, that are not so easy. And quite frankly, that's been a challenge for both the Department of Defense and its databases to make that translation. If you look at the Heroes to Hire website and type in infantry officer, things pop up like security consultant or security guard, which have nothing to do with the experience of the veteran.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Steele, the American Legion is not taking a position on Chairman Miller's bill to create the Veterans Economic Opportunity Administration. Does the Legion have a resolution on the initiative that would actually increase oversight of economic opportunity initiatives?
We do not have a resolution that speaks to that legislation, so we took no position.
Okay, I see. All right. The next question is for Mr. Gallucci. Can you tell me why your read of our bill, of my bill, H.R. 2481, could allow a veteran to accidentally revoke the wrong education benefit when actually the intent of the legislation is to prevent that mistake? I mean, I've actually watched the claims processors go through that part of an original claim as they're setting it up, and I can see if I put myself into the veteran's shoes, I can see how they could make that mistake.
Absolutely. I want to explain a little bit about where our justification came for. We definitely support the intent of the bill, but to echo a little bit of what Mr. Coy had said earlier, we do have some concerns about the practical application of it, and we'd be happy to sit down with your staff afterwards to discuss the specifics of the bill and how it's written out. Just reading the complexity of the language, we would be concerned that if VA made a decision for a veteran to revoke a certain benefit, that if the veteran really did want to use that benefit, that they would still have that option.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually the bill is designed that way so that the VA will make a provisional determination, then the veteran can always revoke that. So we've tried to build that into the bill. For all of you, we've got about a minute left. About 3 years ago, there was a significant concern about the large number of foreclosures that were in violation of the Service Member Civil Relief Act. And my question for you is this, and I think some of you touched on it in your testimony. The question is pretty simple. Do you think the financial services industry has cleaned up its act? Are you actually continuing to hear about foreclosures under the SCRA?
Our only empirical evidence, we have a Service Members Law Center that is fielding more than 1,000 calls a month from reservists in some sort of distress or with questions. About half of those are USERA or employment related. About half of the remaining half are financial institution related. Foreclosure is not one of the issues that we're hearing. We're hearing more of issues of credit card and other lending abuses, not foreclosures.
Mr. Steele or Mr. Gallucci, can you give me a yes/no answer?
Chairman Flores, if you don't mind, I would like to take that question for the record. We've been speaking recently with the Department of Justice's Veterans Fraud Initiative and some of the ways that the federal government is tracking complaints by veterans specifically related to banking and credit issues. I don't have their latest information in front of me, but I think we can come up with a better answer for you. But we do think that this is a major problem that's ongoing for the veterans community.
Okay, thank you. Now recognize the ranking member for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Gallucci, at the beginning of your testimony, you said that the VRAP program is underutilized. I'd like to know the top 3 reasons, in your opinion, for that, and then what solutions could be put in place to address that problem.
Absolutely. Thanks for the question. What we've seen as the top hurdles are access to approved programs, the difference between part-time, full-time approval, but then also the financial concerns for a veteran, which isn't really related to what this committee would have jurisdiction over. But let me talk to the first two specifically. What I mentioned in my testimony was the access to remediation. The example that I used back in the hearing in April came from the Community College of Rhode Island Student Veterans Organization. And what they had explained to the VFW was that a veteran may enter an approved program that doesn't necessarily correspond with the academic calendar, the traditional academic calendar at that community college. So what happens is before that veteran can enter the program, they may have failed a basic math or basic typing class. So they would need significant remediation before they can successfully complete it. But what happens during the enrollment phase is that remediation doesn't necessarily correlate with the approved program, so at some point they're going to drop below full-time. And they've run into a number of hurdles at that school specifically, but we've also heard of other examples where remediation has been a problem. Next would be an approval of certain institutions, and we outlined this as well in April, just touched on it briefly, was that it's specifically relegated to two-year institutions, so community colleges, technical schools, but there are four-year colleges that serve as de facto community colleges in their communities. I believe the example we used was Penn State in Erie, Pennsylvania. So our concern is that there are good two-year programs, certificate programs at four-year institutions where VRAP-eligible veterans could be going, but they can't get in because of how the program was drafted up.
And you would think that that requires a legislative solution to address those problems?
We do, just because of how the Vow to Hire Heroes Act was written. It specifically outlines that it's only for two-year programs.
With regards to proportionality, if that's retained, I mean, that's half-time student, half-time paid, do you think that could actually harm veterans rather than helping them?
That's a good question, and that is a bit of a concern. And we wouldn't want to see it. We wouldn't want to see a VRAP eligible veteran only taking one class at a time, since you only have 12 months of eligibility for your benefit. But we feel that there would be a happy medium based on the length of your program. Say it was a 9-month certificate program, you have 12 months of benefit. If it goes to just below what would be considered full-time for that institution, we wouldn't necessarily see a problem. But we do understand the concern that a veteran wouldn't be on a reasonable schedule to complete a program if they're only taking 1 or 2 classes at a time.
And then my last question is for the entire panel regarding the military occupational specialties and getting concurrent certification for civilian programs. What problems do you see, or if any, in instituting that kind of policy? Let me refine that a little bit. I guess, who should be in charge of that certification? Should it be done at the state level? If you do that, are you going to run into problems in 50 states having different certification requirements? How do we address that at a national level?
Well, unfortunately, because of the nature of the credentialing system and the federal nature of our system, it's going to have a 50-state, it's going to impact 50 states. So, but the Department of Defense has done a wonderful job of getting on board with this effort. They, from what I understand, are attempting to make every effort to work with us on this and work with you on this. I don't see why it can't be done. We look forward to the report in September.
Okay. Thank you, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Kirkpatrick. Mr. Cook, do you have any questions?
Yes, sir. I had one, and I want to apologize. I was in another committee for the beginning of this, and maybe I missed part of this, but it was in regards to your comment in one of the earlier bills about the gentleman was making about the Purple Heart, and exactly how being a reservist, that if I understood it correctly, and I was somewhat shocked, and maybe I didn't read it right because it wasn't on my. Could you go into
this? Is not a reserve specific bill. The bill, which is H.R. 2210, talks about the extension of Frye Amendment scholarships to Purple Heart recipients who die subsequent to the end of their military service. And this would extend that benefit a period of time, and we think that's a good idea.
Okay, I was a little bit confused because I was starting to wonder, wait a minute, it doesn't make any difference if you get a Purple Heart, whether you're a reserve or a regular. It's just combat enemy action, and it wouldn't, but thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate that. That's all I had.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. Ms. Kirkpatrick has another question.
Mr. Gallucci, I'd like to hear your response to my last question about the military occupational specialty and the civilian certification and meshing that together at a 50-state level.
Absolutely. This is why we feel that the DoD pilot is so important, and also allowing service members to access credentialing opportunities while they're still on active duty. As my colleague from the American Legion said, it is going to, because of how complicated licensure and credentialing is, and because the states have the right and duty to license professionals as they see fit within their borders, it's going to be a multi-tiered solution. What we can do on the federal level is make sure that service members, while they're on active duty, have access to civilian credentialing opportunities that will help smooth that transition. So once they decide to leave the military, that there won't be a gap between their end of time in service and the time that it takes to start a career.
Thank you very much, and thank the panel. I yield back.
If there are no further questions, the witnesses are excused with our thanks. We appreciate your participation and your insight that you've given us today. I would like to announce that the Economic Opportunity Subcommittee is tentatively scheduled to hold a markup on some or all of the bills that we talked about today, that we heard testimony on today, on July the 18th. Finally, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend the remarks on any of the bills under consideration today. Hearing no objections so ordered, this hearing is adjourned.